All right, so let's dive into exactly what happened in this controversial Kentucky Derby with the associate editor of the Thoroughbred Daily News, Joe Bianca. Thank you so much for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate this, and to help us kind of digest really what we saw. As a storyteller of horse racing, this is always going to be remembered as the horse that didn't win. I mean, I think the lasting image of the 2019 Kentucky Derby is going to be the horse that didn't end up wearing the roses.
Definitely. I mean, there hasn't been a disqualification in the Derby since 1968, and that was because of a medication positive, not because of interference. So it's an exceedingly rare moment in a big race like this, and I think for sure everybody's talking about and will be talking about what happened after the race rather than what happened, who crossed the line first.
Yeah, exactly. But at this point, we're usually breaking down where the winning move was made and how it was won. But what we saw in this one, maximum security runs wire to wire. Obviously, he was disqualified. But put this into perspective: did the best horse win the Kentucky Derby?
I would say no. Just because maximum security was doing all the dirty work. The pace was pretty quick. It slowed down as the race went on, but he was cutting out all the fractions, and he really had to turn back a lot of challenges, including Country House's. Country House had him at the top of the lane, and maximum security turned him back. So I would say no, but there's some debate to be had about that.
Yeah, I mean, he was fighting off all of the challengers, but obviously he did it in an illegal way. But so I think we really need you to kind of clarify this for us. At what level is this a disqualification? What level of foul does it take to merit a full-on DQ?
I think what happens usually is that horses are allowed a bit of drifting. They can drift out or drift in, but what happens and what raises it to the level of a disqualification usually is if someone gets pinched back and loses ground, and in the steward's view, loses all chance to win the race. And I think that's what happened here. If he had drifted out one path and just carried the horses out a little bit, I think he would have been left up. But because he came out, and Long Range Toddy was the horse that he got placed behind. Long Range Toddy, if you watch the replay, got squeezed between War of Will and Country House because maximum security drifted out, and I think the stewards felt that that cost Long Range Toddy any chance of winning the race. And usually when that happens, when the winner costs someone else any chance of winning the race, then they'll take that horse down.
But we see bumping in horse racing all of the time.
Right.
Do they call it a little tighter coming down the backstretch as opposed to what we see in the first quarter?
Yeah, I think in general they will give more weight to incidents that happen closer to the wire rather than if they were coming out of the gate and this happened. I don't know if that would raise to the level of DQ, but this was at a crucial point of the race too. This was approaching the top of the stretch, and this is where horses corner and start to make their big move. And I think that the stewards took that into account, that this was when other horses were trying to make their move and maximum security didn't let them.
Yeah. Blocking. You can do it in NASCAR. You can't do it in horse racing. So ultimately, did the stewards make the right call?
I think so. I think because, like I said, because Long Range Toddy got pinched out, if he had just taken the horses a little bit wider, then that'd be one thing. But I think because he squeezed the other horse back, and at that point, they might as well have just pulled Long Range Toddy up. He had no chance once he lost all that ground. So I think they did make the right call. It's hard because he was best, and Long Range Toddy had no chance of winning. War Will really had no chance of winning. So you elevate a lot of horses that probably would not have run better anyway. But it's about the chance. It's about the chance to win. And once you cost another horse the entire chance to win, then the stewards, I think, made the right call.
And I think that you'll appreciate this as well. You know, forget about the money that was lost and what have you. As a storyteller, we lose the opportunity to tell an amazing story with Maximum Security, who was a claimer horse, a horse that could have been owned by any person in the country for $16,000 before his first race. If you would have done that, you would have had the most ultimate rags to riches story of an owner claiming a horse and then walking him, into the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, and just for people who aren't too familiar with racing, this is extremely rare. There was another horse in the race actually who was claimed. Tax was claimed for $50,000, but for a horse to make their debut in a $16,000 claimer, this isn't like he ran at tougher levels and then they dropped him down. He debuted as a $16,000 claimer. So the question was always, why did you risk him at that early stage? But what they did was after he won first out, they put him where he couldn't be claimed anymore, and then he went on to what looked like a Derby winner.
Yeah, well, no kidding. But you know what? We don't want to do a disservice to the actual horse that did win the Derby. Country House only won one of his 6 races before this. He never seemed like a threat to win a Derby. But what we saw out of this horse was this horse has legs down the stretch.
Yeah, and he's got classic pedigree. He's got long distance pedigree. He's got a great Hall of Fame trainer in Bill Mott, who somehow hadn't won the Kentucky Derby up until this point. He'd won pretty much every other big race. And he had been hanging around, and he'd been clunking up for 2nd or 3rd in these prep races. Enough of a reason for them to take a shot in the Derby, but this was hard to see. You know, this was hard to see him beating not only the horses that beat him in the previous races, but then a whole slew of new challengers. So he had held his own and shown enough promise to earn that trip. But this was a shocker.
Yeah, when you actually start to look at the pedigree of some of these horses, less than a handful of horses that were in the Kentucky Derby actually had Triple Crown pedigree. Yeah. But Country House was one of those horses. He was bred for this level of racing. Who was his sire? That's right, Looking at Lucky, who won the Preakness. So do you think that maybe he's going to get a little bit more love from the bettors in the Preakness because his sire was a Preakness winner?
He has to, yeah. I mean, at this point, he's made it clear that
he's not going to be 65 to 1 in the Preakness.
He'll probably be about a 13th of that. But yeah, he's made it clear now that it's not just potential. He actually has real talent acted upon, and I think actually the sky is the limit because of that breeding and because of that classic pedigree that we're talking about.
It's going to be interesting, too, whether we're going to see Maximum Security actually run the Preakness. Sometimes the horses that don't win but feel like they could, push for the Belmont might sit out the Preakness so that they're well rested for the Belmont.
Right.
Do you have any idea which way he might go?
I would guess that if he's going to run in one of the two, it would be the Preakness, just because he doesn't really have 1.5 mile breeding. His sire didn't really go further than 1 mile and 1/16, and he's a speed horse. In general, Pimlico and the Preakness plays a lot kinder to speed horses than the Belmont, just because it's hard to click off 10 furlongs, or rather 12 furlongs on the lead. So if I had to guess, I would say he's going to end up in the Preakness.
You can get his thoughts on the Thoroughbred Daily News. Joe Bianca, thank you so much for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
All right, appreciate it. All right, stick around. We're back after this.